Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Whiskey Congress is back in session. Steve and I are together in the Cleveland studio. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. How you doing, man?
Good. For some reason, you did like the quiet countdown. I like hold my breath.
Okay.
I don't know why. Anyway,
Like a little inside baseball there, but okay. Right. Probably a good thing. Our mics are very sensitive. Before we get into stuff from the week, I want to revisit something we talked about last week, and that would be Attorney John Pierce, who was representing 17 people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, and he asked for, his firm asked for a postponement of proceedings because he was in the hospital on a ventilator for COVID.
unresponsive. He was on a ventilator and unresponsive due to COVID is exactly what they told the court.
Judge.
Federal District Court.
Now, Steve, I remember thinking this felt weird. I don't remember if I said it on the last show or not, but now it's officially weird because now we don't know what is going on with this guy.
Well, explain.
Well, so he may or may not have had COVID. He may or may not have been on a ventilator. He's now gone missing.
Right. He's not in the hospital where he supposedly was, and you don't go from unresponsive on a ventilator to, well, I'm just going to walk out. See you guys later.
Tiptoe through the tulips. The reason I said I was suspicious early on, and I'm always hesitant to call something out. Like, to be honest, when Rush Limbaugh said, I've got inoperable lung cancer, I thought, I don't believe you. You've been alive your entire life.
Which is, I think, fair.
Okay. I'm sure.
I think it's
piss a lot of people off.
With Limbaugh, I believe it's completely fair. Turns out that it was true. Was it lung cancer or was it
lung?
I thought he had pancreatic cancer.
I think it was lung. Either way, he's dead.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but he's an awful human being, and
he was.
And but it's tough for me to go there, whether it's Catholic guilt or whatever. I don't know. But when I heard this about John Pierce, I'm like, this seems like an awfully convenient way to extend a court thing, because if you're fighting against the libs and you want to say, well, I've got COVID, liberals aren't going to challenge you on that.
Yeah, I don't. So, okay, I know where you're going with this. This guy was a big anti-vaxxer. COVID is a prank. COVID is a hoax. Healthy living and all that stuff. Even if it's real, healthy living will get you where you need to go, sort of guy. And there's been a number of stories of conservative spokespeople, if you will, who are, very outspoken against COVID, the vaccine, any measure to try to minimize its effects, masks, all that sort of stuff. And they have died. Yeah. Right? Not have got COVID, but no, they have gotten COVID and died. Yeah. So this fell in line with that for me. So it didn't really raise any eyebrows like, oh, another one bites the dust, right? But it comes to find out this guy is missing, and then they're sending some guy who's not even licensed,
right?
To represent these people, which means that everything that the unlicensed guy did to that point, basically, that doesn't necessarily void their case, but it puts, every single one of them is going to have to, file for a new counsel and all this other stuff. They made a mess here.
And sometimes buying time is a legal tactic. But
this isn't a legal tactic. So everything I've read about this guy is that he's, a lot of people believe that he's a fraud. There's some questions about his law license. There's questions about, money that he owes, a lot of debt. He started this firm that was he claimed was going to be, one of the biggest firms, litigation firms in the country, and it went nowhere. And he owes a lot of money to a lot of people, and there's a good chance that he owes some money to some people that don't take very kindly to not getting repaid. Which is very much what this feels and sounds like. Oh, I have COVID and I'm dying, and maybe they back off, which gives him the time he needs to skate and disappear, because that's what he's done. Or they found him in the hospital, or they just found him in general,
or he got whacked, and
right?
we're never going to find him again.
We may never see him again. And while it sounds dramatic and ridiculous,
it's like Sopranos,
look. I mean, you read up on this guy, John Pierce. He called himself the champion of the conservatives or something ridiculous like that, and. There's not many people who have anything good to say about him or his law practices or his, the services that he provides. And it just sounds like a guy who talked the big game, was a hustler, very much like, the guy we were talking, Stormy Daniels' lawyer. Avenatti. Yeah. I mean, very much in the same sort of frame of Avenatti, just on the other side, but this guy may have gotten himself in even deeper.
Was Avenatti that blackmailed Nike? Or Okay. I was just making sure I wasn't mixing with another scumbag.
Oh, yeah. No, Michael Avenatti.
And he's in prison now.
Oh, yes. Because Nike was like, fuck you. Like, we're just going to call the FBI.
We have more money than you, and the FBI is on our side. And when you leave a voicemail that is extortion, it doesn't go well.
Right. Like, we have more money than you and the FBI. So we're fine. You're going to prison, and we're paying no one.
But all that money they lost for endorsing or having Colin Kaepernick as his endorser. Never mind, that was a joke.
But yeah, so John Pierce, who we talked about, who was kind of last week, was these people keep hammering and railing against COVID and the vaccine and everything else, and look at them dying. Well, COVID didn't kill him, but I don't know.
Tony Soprano may have.
Tony Soprano or Vladimir Kuchinov.
Yeah, more likely Vladimir Kuchinov. Kuchinov, by the way, nice name.
Yeah. Literally just pull that one out of my ass.
I want to jump to that, though, because it fits in with talking about January 6th. So the QAnon Shaman, I don't have his name in front of me.
Damn it, why wouldn't you write it down?
Because I suck. Anyway, the douchebag who showed up with the buffalo horns and his face all painted up has pled guilty to obstructing justice, basically, or obstructing an election. He's facing a 3 to 4 year sentence.
Yep.
That he pled guilty to.
Well, I mean, maximum sentence is 20 years, but he probably will only get a
3 or
few.
4. But
Jacob Chansley.
There we go.
From Arizona.
We've talked about this on the show before.
Yep.
When people say 3 to 4 years, that's nothing. Yep. That's a long fucking time.
Yep.
That's 3 or 4 Super Bowls.
Yep.
That's 1,200 days you are eating prison food. He wants organic prison food.
And
I doubt he got it so far.
No, he'll continue to get it because he's claiming it's religion and they can't.
All right.
Which is, honestly, I would fucking give him his organic food.
Also give him his 4 years.
The bottom line, yeah. I mean, if he's looking at 3 to 4 years now, he'll get time served. So however many months he's been in prison, like that'll shave it off. So he's probably looking at another 18 months in prison, maybe less, depending. I think the hearing, the sentencing hearing is set for sometime in November. So that's all this time, that will be tacked on to, or be taken into consideration to his actual sentence. And some people, that's not enough. Look, he went in, he made a big spectacle. Did he rough up any police? Did he break anything? Not that we know of. But look, the bottom line is this group of people, violated the law by doing what they, you're not invited in, you bum rush in, you run past police,
right.
You know what I mean? They're telling you to stop and go back, stop. You go into these private places where you're not supposed to be. You're clearly, and you admittedly acknowledge that you're trying to disrupt an election and a federal government process and everything else. So yeah, there's repercussions for that. Right, and some people are just like, well, they've already spent enough time, and he had to do time in solitary confinement. Tough shit, right? We're talking about our federal government. We're talking about the duly elected president of the United States. We're talking about, our constitutional process. We're talking about, like, literally the thread and the heartbeat of our republic and our democracy, and these people came in to disrupt that, to stop it, and I don't care why. I was just following the crowd, and I just got sucked into the moment. I was just in there. I didn't do anything. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. The second that you didn't remove yourself from the crowd as you saw them approaching and going through those doors and breaching those doors, and there are police on the ground being beaten, and there are police being pushed and attacked with their own equipment. Like, you see all that and you still push forward and you're yelling at the police. I'm sorry. Like, I don't care if you went in, I just was in there. I just wanted to feel the moment briefly. Like, no, you committed a crime and there needs to be a major price to pay. This shouldn't be something that people just get a slap on the wrist just because, they got caught up in the moment. We're talking about our federal government. We're talking about the Capitol building.
Yet, in his mind, I honestly believe he thinks this was cosplay. I mean,
he
put on that stupid fucking costume,
look,
paints his face. I'm not saying in an innocent way. I'm thinking he believed he was part of a righteous cause, but he wanted to be exactly. The shaman. He called himself the shaman.
That's what he. I mean, that was his stick,
right?
You know, I mean, like, I don't think. I think he really saw himself as someone.
I didn't mean to dismiss it like.
I think because when you say that, then that because remember his attorney tried to claim that he's got Asperger's, so. He's like too stupid to know the difference. You remember that? We talked about it.
Yeah, we did. I remember that.
So you got to be careful.
I believe he's a pretty dumb guy. So
yeah, I mean, I believe he's dumb, and maybe he does have Asperger's. But either way, that doesn't absolve you from what you did.
If you kill someone and you have Asperger's, you still killed someone.
Right.
And
like they don't
he didn't kill someone.
Pass.
He just obstructed our electoral process or tried to. And frankly, it's so weird to say this, but had the Capitol Police just opened fire, there would have been a ton of bloodshed. And I would be sitting here saying, they were doing their jobs.
Yeah,
I'm not happy about that thought. I know I'm just taking an ugly turn there.
I mean, it depends on, how that all goes down. But I don't want to necessarily go there. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think that there's a lot of...
there's a lot of nuance there.
But, with this guy, he put himself front and center, right?
Yeah.
And not only here, but leading up to this moment, right? And so it's just you don't have a defense, which is why he pled. All right, mind you, he pled. This didn't go to trial. He pled guilty to the most serious violation, the most serious felony offense. I think to me this is right, and he's going to end up spending probably multiple years in prison with a felony on his record that isn't going to be able to get sealed or wiped away. He loses his right to vote. He loses his ability to buy a firearm. All those things that this crowd, right, that these people are so adamant about, right? Like, and they definitely want to make sure that the average criminal in the inner city loses all these things. Well, now here you go, right? This is the law and order that you are so happy about, right? You're so proud of. You wave your little blue and black flags with the line and all that other stuff. Well, here you go. So you live with that, and there's no relief from it. You live with that time you spent in jail because it is a miserable experience. You are locked in there, right? Like you're locked in there with the common criminals, some not common, some very very bad, angry, shitty people.
This is federal too, so this is a place like Leavenworth.
Right,
you're not that there's luxury jails, but
right. I mean, is it maximum security? No, but like people talk about Club Fed or Club Med or whatever when it comes to prison. Like when your freedom is restricted and you can't do the things that you want to do, you can't do the things you normally do, and everyone's like, oh, I would do what they do in the movies, and I would just do a bunch of push-ups and read a lot, and then I'd be a lawyer by the time I came out. Is what I do.
Time serve me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see how he comes out. We'll see how all this. I guarantee you when he comes out, I would be willing to bet that he's going to be a fan of prison reform at that point in time.
Protest that.
Yeah, but and I feel no sympathy for him. I hope he gets.
Like
the maximum sentence is 20 years. I don't think he deserves that as much as I want to be angry and spiteful. But giving him 4 years, I got no issue with that.
Me either. And it's going to be interesting to see how many other of these cases plead out the same way.
And because there's a guy on Twitter who was engaging with us, and I expressed my look, based off of these parameters, I would definitely max him out. And the guy's like, he's already done some time, and he had to do a solitary confinement. Like, what more do you want? I want him to serve more years. Right? And he's like, this is bullshit. All they did was a little trespassing. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bullshit argument. Right? It's a completely bullshit argument. And, these people have they don't have that same sort of compassion for the average kid that's getting, harassed and arrested by police for bullshit reasons. They have no compassion for a guy like Elijah McClain, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But yet these people who completely disrupted our democratic process because they were pissed off because they were told to do something that they didn't want to do, right? Like spoiled fucking babies, decide to go in and commit federal crimes, right? Misdemeanors and felonies, right? Because they didn't want to be told what to do, and they didn't like the person who was elected because there's no possible way that they could be considered wrong, and more people voted for the other guy than them. How could that possibly be? Like, well, I'm sorry you have trouble with reality, but that is reality. And for every action, there is a reaction, right? And the reaction to this is the fact that this guy is going to go to jail. He's going to go to jail for an extended period of time. And if you support him not going to jail for the maximum amount of time that he should, within reason, right, then I question your patriotism, right? And you put patriot in your fucking Twitter handle, I call bullshit, sir.
In my opinion, if you call yourself a patriot, you're not.
Right.
Right? If your actions can dictate your patriotism.
Yes.
If you feel the need to slap that title on yourself, I'm calling bullshit 90+% of the time. I'm a patriot. I believe in all these awful things that mean overthrowing democracy because I don't like how this happened. And we're going to hit a bunch of other similar topics, but this actually leads into Madison Cawthorn and Ron Johnson, who both have talked about the stolen election. Madison Cawthorn literally said, if these rigged elections don't stop, we need to resort to bloodshed. And that's not an 100% accurate quote, but basically he said, I'm willing to pick up arms and kill fellow Americans if these rigged elections don't stop. Now, one, the election wasn't rigged. Trump lost because he was a loudmouth douchebag who pissed off enough people in his own party. Yes, he inspired 70-some million, which is terrifying in its own right, but the election was lost. And he's still playing the big lie card. He's still saying we need to fix our election system. And he literally said that it may come to taking up arms against fellow Americans. He is a Republican congressman from North Carolina, and there needs to be consequences for what he's saying. And by the way, right after January 6th, he sang a very different tune. Yeah. He was saying, this was ridiculous. This attack on our Capitol building was unexcusable. So QAnon Shaman guy was not getting endorsed by Madison Cawthorn. He is now reaping the problems from his rhetoric that everyone now says the election was fixed. So now he has to go on the election was fixed bandwagon and say literally like civil war is coming. And fine, say that, but as a congressman, you should be able to back up your rationale for it, and you can't because it's all based on bullshit. And this is a distinct contrast to Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, but I see you making faces at me, so I want to give you a chance.
Well, you're not wrong in what you're saying. I think there is a more, I guess, academic approach to how a guy like this should be handled.
Meaning Madison Cawthorn, not Ron Johnson.
Madison Cawthorn. With the statements that he made, now his office came out and they said, "Oh no,
he didn't mean that.
He didn't mean violence. He meant that violence should never be the answer." And it's just like, well, he literally said that.
He said bloodshed. He said bloodshed. He said taking up arms against Americans.
Right. Like I don't understand how you could possibly say that that's not. He didn't mean violence, but I just, with him, I think the issue is the way our laws are written regarding politicians, congressmen, senators, whatever, and the latitude that they're given in their speech.
Sure.
Right? I mean, because...
And we're given, too.
Yeah, they are, but, I mean, again, they because of the platform and the positions that they hold and the influence that they have, I think that, they say something like this, and it's literally protected. Right? Like, I mean, he can turn around and say, like, his office can come out and say, oh, well, he didn't mean it like the way you're saying it. And there's literally no repercussion for this type of speech. And to me, that's where we have a problem, right? Like, there should be, right? Like, you're a congressman. I'm sorry. I don't care. Like, you can't say, you shouldn't be able to say freely with zero repercussion that, certain things need to happen a certain way, or there will be, or should be, or could be bloodshed. right? Caused by the people that you want to vote for you.
Right.
Right. I mean, and so, should these people, congressmen, senators, elected public officials, just be able to say shit like this with no consequence? And people will get in the argument about free speech and that you can't limit free speech. And I don't know, but we're comfortable with this, right? At what cost, right? Because here's the problem that you have. All you need is one person. All you need is one person to say, you know what, he's right. And you know what? You know the type of person. I was a big fan.
Dylan Roof.
Well, no, not even Dylan. You know what? Timothy McVeigh was my favorite guy from the 90s, right? And Timothy McVeigh is more of a problem than fucking Dylan Roof, right? I mean, let's be honest here, right? Like, so and all you need is, like that you need someone with that same sort of mentality. Clearly you don't need a lot of know-how. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure something like that out. But all you need is just one psychopath to hear this guy speak like that specifically. And that guy that we talked about last week who parked his truck in front of the Library of Congress talking about bombs.
Right.
Like all of a sudden that guy isn't just in there talking shit. He actually has a car loaded up with bombs or fertilizer or whatever. And wipes out hundreds of people or thousands of people.
That's a better reference.
I mean, I just think that this sort of speech from people like this is dangerous, right? And I think we just saw an example of it with Trump in January 6th.
Yeah.
Right? And Trump wasn't even as direct as this, right? Like Trump at least kind of tried to weave it in because Trump was very, if not anything, Trump was always aware of the line. Right? He knew that there was a line that needed to be crossed to get his point across, really to get people worked up. But he made sure that he kind of went back and forth across that line, but never too far, right? So he could always have some level of deniability and could always sort of, you got to look at it from this angle. And as long as you look at it from this angle, then there's nothing wrong. And that's, it started from day one with his inauguration, right? Oh, more people saw me get inaugurated than anybody in the world and any other president ever, right? And the reason why that's a true statement is because in 2021, people have YouTube Live and a million different ways to stream. So yes, by the benefit of it being the year that it is and where technology is, yes, your inauguration was watched by more people, but in terms of people who physically attended it, right, or people who watched it on a normal measuring stick, right, that's different. And that's what Trump was a master of. This guy isn't even doing that. He's like, if you guys don't do what we want the way we want, there's going to be bloodshed, period.
And then his office tries to spin it. And when you say there should be consequences, I 100% agree. And I think that consequence should be he needs to stand on the floor of Congress and answer for what he said. I don't want there to be criminal repercussions for it, even though I could probably talk myself out of that statement, because I do believe in the First Amendment. I do believe in free speech, and that's what free speech is all about. We've said this 1,000 times on the show and elsewhere, that freedom of speech doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want without consequence. However, unless you are causing actual harm, you cannot be criminally prosecuted for free speech. This borders on that.
Right.
This is like almost like they say you can't yell fire at a theater. Right. This is pretty close to yelling fire at a theater.
And so, should the consequence be this guy gets thrown in jail? No, not necessarily. But censure?
Hell yeah.
Right? I mean, thrown off committees?
Hell yeah.
His security clearance access. Like there's ways to have without it being, I don't know, overly retaliatory.
Yeah. I want, if I'm going to deal with this, I'm saying there should be a consequence where he is in front of a committee in Congress, shown saying the things he said, and said, please explain yourself. And
you got to be careful with that. I mean, because look, at this point, conservatives, Trumplicans, or whatever we want to call them, that doesn't do what you think it does. You know what that does? That gives him another platform to say something else even more ridiculous, outlandish, and then all I could see is Nancy Pelosi or Adam Schiff banging a gavel like, "Oh, order, order," and this guy standing there with his arms up in the air saying,
"That's a risk."
Whatever,
that's
whatever
legit.
he wants to say. It's not a. That's what's going to happen. That's what they all. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Boebert, whatever.
Oh
my God, she's fucking crazy about that.
The girl, Boebert from Colorado, like all of them. This is the direction that they go now, right? It's just like. Screw reality, screw actual common sense. I'm just going to say something even more ridiculous than I said before. Get everybody worked up in a frenzy. They probably won't even be able to finish whatever you want to call it, the actual session, and then it'll be all they talk about on the news until something happens, and they'll completely forget that, oh, by the way, something else was supposed to happen.
I wish I could argue with that. So, do you have a thought on how to police this kind of action, this kind of behavior? Because that's the best I can do.
I mean, things like I said. I mean, you do a closed session, you're right. Like, I mean, you don't give them an opportunity to sit there and showboat and all that other stuff. You do it privately, and then it's just like, all right, we're gonna censure you. You're off committees. All the various forms of punishment that aren't, impeachment. You can't fire them. But I mean, impeachment is basically your option, or jail.
The only thing I hear what you're saying. The only thing I'm going to say back about that is taking these dopes off committees just gives them more time to do shit like this.
Yeah,
and I hear you. You're right.
But I mean, okay, so people, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is
perfect
example. But she can't influence policy, right?
Like she can still vote.
She can, but her votes.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean.
Right.
She just doesn't have the same influence on the actual policy other than the vote. I mean, and that's still important, but at the same time, as an opponent running against her, it's easy to say, like, look, what could she possibly be doing for you, considering her limited impact here?
You're being logical. I just think that the voter in their districts don't give a shit.
They don't, but I mean, it's not necessarily the people who are going to vote for them. It's the people who are on the fence, the people who really don't like either side and or looking for a reason to vote against someone else, right? And people want to say there's no such thing as a swing voter anymore. Shut the fuck up. Yes, there are. There are plenty of people who are tired of all the noise. They hate everybody, and they just need a reason to dislike the other person enough to vote for the other person. They don't necessarily.
I think we saw that in the 2020 election, right? There were a lot of people who didn't like Joe Biden, but they were tired of Trump.
Right, and there were a lot of people who, and so much so that they voted for Joe Biden, but then they voted for Republicans in these other offices.
Which brings us to Ron Johnson, by the way. Yeah. Ron Johnson, Republican representative from Wisconsin, was literally challenged by a woman at an event saying, how could Trump have lost? And I don't know if she was trolling him or if she was being sincere, but she literally was like, in his face saying, the election isn't real, right? Because you won. And Ron Johnson tap danced masterfully and basically said, if you look at the voting numbers, this many people voted for Republicans and 5 million fewer, not 5 million fewer, but 500,000 fewer in Wisconsin voted for Trump because they were tired of his nonsense. And she was trying to get him to say that the election was fake, and he wouldn't do it. And he just said, look at the voter polls. Look at the poll numbers. This many Republicans chose to vote for Republican members of Congress and but chose not to vote for Trump. And again, I don't know if she was trolling him or not. If she was masterful. But he literally tap danced around and said,
I don't think that's tap dancing, though.
It's also speaking the truth.
Right.
He tap danced around saying, yes, Trump lost. Fucking deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, he said it diplomatically. I mean, there's a difference. Yeah, I mean, tap dancing.
You're right. I should actually give him some credit.
I mean,
you're right.
He answered the question honestly and legitimately. I mean, he just didn't go out to crush her soul because, I mean, I voted for her.
There's that. That's a very good point by you. But he wouldn't say, yes, the election was stolen. Madison Cawthorn is still out there doing the whole stolen election thing.
Right.
And he needs to fuck right off. All right, can we move on from this douchebag?
Yeah.
Okay, because let's talk about Texas.
Let's talk about Texas.
Texas a bunch because... So first of all, Texas has passed an abortion restriction law that says after 6 weeks you cannot have an abortion. Now, I have to do a full disclosure. My mom texted me and asked me if we were going to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I said, we never talk about abortion. She said, why? And I said, because Steve and I know we'll never have one. And my mom said, is that a principled stand or a cop-out? A bit of both.
Well, I mean, it's not, for me, it's not a cop-out. I think that the people this impacts the most, like, I think the argument that you hear from a lot of women is that men shouldn't be making these decisions about women's bodies. And I completely support that, right? And so I typically stay out of like the lower level kind of conversations about, just the average. Sure. What do you think about abortion? Like I'm fine with it. Like I'm not going to argue with it if you don't. I'm not going to argue with you if you don't, or against you. Like I'm not trying to change your mind. I just like abortions are fine with me, right? Certain limitations, like obviously, like you need to be able to, there's got to be a stopping point
at 8 months and 29 days,
right?
Come
like,
on.
yeah, we can't be, but I mean, and that's not the reality anywhere, right? I mean, like the conservatives try to paint this picture that you can get an abortion, a month before your due date, and that's bullshit. Roe v. Wade, it's 24 weeks, I think, which is kind of right around the time of viability for the fetus, but. What's going on in Texas, like we can't ignore. And this law is really devastating on a lot of different ways. I'm disappointed and not surprised given who is on the court, but I'm disappointed that the Supreme Court didn't step in, but I understand why they didn't. And the Supreme Court's reasoning for not stepping in is simply that right now, it's just a law, but no one has standing because no one has actually followed through and sued yet, right? Like, so you need something to basically trigger their analysis and review, and because we don't have a case, they're making the argument that they don't have, the standing to be able to review it. Now, that's bullshit, but I mean, it's technically right, but they could very well. Look at the law on its face and make a decision on whether to at least, put an injunction in until it could be litigated. But they didn't do that. And so what they want to do is to force this to come through the court system to give them the ability to review it. Now, the problem is that because there's no injunction, then the law is on the books and stands. And even if someone does sue and then countersue and triggers it, if you don't get a higher level injunction, then this law is in place, and it really is to the detriment of lower income women. And the big reason
That's
is
a
like,
huge
look,
factor.
If your dad is some oil billionaire in Texas, right? If you're Jerry Jones's granddaughter, and you happen to get knocked up by some dude named Cody, right, who drinks Monsters and all that other shit, then you're going to get on a plane, and even though you can't get an abortion in Texas, you're going to get on a plane and go to Colorado or California or wherever the hell you need to go to get it done, and then come back and have no problems. But if you're a girl who lives in the inner city of Dallas or Houston or something like that, right, or you're some poor girl who lives in Lubbock and got knocked up by some cute farm boy, you don't have the same access and the same ability to do something that you feel that you need to do, which is the best thing for you and in your situation. And that's really the downside of the Supreme Court's inaction. That's the worst part about it, is that the law gets to stand until we get it into a place where they can take their review. And I'm not confident that they'll overturn it, but they should, because there are some just glaring issues with this law. Right, in terms of how it was crafted, and people were like, "Oh, well, I mean, they just seem to, they've outsmarted the Supreme Court. Like, I don't even know if anyone can bring this case, right? Like, so the way the law is crafted, like, okay, so it's 6 weeks, right? Like, anyone, like, you can't get an abortion after 6 weeks, or I should say, until there's cardiac activity detected. Right. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a full heart or an actual heartbeat, but you have, arteries and all that stuff forming, and blood starts to flow. And once they could pick that sound up on a sonogram or whatever, then they're saying that is basically the beginning of life, and so you have to have an abortion. You can't have an abortion at that point. The issue with that is most women don't know that they're pregnant. pregnant at that point in time, right? Because it takes, for a woman, she's got to miss her period first to kind of get an indicator that she might be, right? And so that's 4 weeks, depending on when this all goes down. But so you've got that 4-week period, and then after that, you've got another 2 weeks to figure out that you're pregnant, to get this, abortion arranged and have it completed before, you get the cardiac activity that they're saying that signifies the cutoff point. And it's just not realistic for most women in the situation where they're considering an abortion. It's just not, right? My mother, for instance, she had 3 kids. She had me and my 2 sisters. With my youngest sister, she didn't know she was pregnant until 11 weeks in, right? And she had already had 2 kids, so it's not like she was unfamiliar with the process or her body or whatever, but she didn't know for 11 weeks. And my mom, at that point, it's not like she was a young teenager. Like when, like when I was born, she was, and my sisters were born 8 and 10 years after me, right? And this is my youngest sister, so this was the last one. So, I mean, women don't just,
it's not like a turkey.
Right. I mean, there's no, it's not a light that comes on or a switch or a button that gets pushed that says all of a sudden, like, oh shit, you're pregnant, right? Like there's just, it's different for every woman, and it takes time for their bodies to adjust and alert them to the situation, and this is done on purpose, right? It's after the time frame for most women is after that 6-week period. So women who can't afford to deal with this another way, right, by going somewhere else, or because they're protected, because they're wealthy, right, and people can pay to kind of have something like this done privately and shielded from the public, are the ones who will suffer here. The other issue is that there's no exception for rape or incest, right? And the argument here is that this is by doing this is legally consistent, right? Intellectually consistent by saying, look, if it's murder when it's just Kevin and Sue having sex, then it's still murder even if it's rapist guy or creepy uncle, right? And so they're saying that no matter what the circumstances that gets you pregnant, there are very, very few instances of where it is allowable for you to terminate that pregnancy, right? And there are very, very narrow circumstances where, the life of the woman has to be in danger, or the harm that would be caused to her by continuing the pregnancy would be so, harmful, it would basically amount to torture. And so that's basically the only way that you can allow for a termination beyond that 6-week period. And there's a lot of people so you're going to force someone who was raped to have a baby by someone who did this terrible thing to them, right? Whether it's just a stranger off the street or a family member or something like that. Which society, we know the damage and the harm that could cause the mother, right? And then eventually ends up playing out against the child if it's not, if you've got a mother who's resentful because of the way this child came to be, it's going to be very hard for that mother to raise that child with love and affection and that maternal instinct that, most children are given. And the same with incest, and the issue with incest is also the biological aspect of families intermix. It's just nightmarish type shit where they're literally still forcing these women and possibly young girls to have these children that they shouldn't be having, and in those situations out of their control. Right? I mean, this is, it's one thing to elect to have an abortion just because you were, you didn't use birth control or the birth control failed or whatever. It's a whole different set of scenarios or a situation when you're talking about a situation that you didn't want, that was forced upon you, and now you have this whole, aside from the life-changing event of the rape occurring, there's the life-changing event that comes with being pregnant and then having the child and then having to raise the child that was born of this horrible thing.
So you said a lot, and I agree with essentially everything you said. I really wanted to hit.
There's more.
Oh wait, there's more.
There's more, right? So, and I'm sorry, but there's just a lot with this law, right? I mean, they packed a lot into it to make it as undefeated as sort of ironclad as possible.
Let me get one piece in here quick. One thing that drives me fucking crazy on this issue is that people who are on either side of it don't want to acknowledge the reality of if we had better sexual education, better availability to forms of birth control, including condoms, this would be so much less of an issue, but it's such a hotbed issue that neither side wants to give up on it. And it's so... There are people who vote exclusively on this issue. I have family members who voted for Donald Trump because he's anti-abortion. Donald Trump has probably paid for 20 abortions. I'm pulling that shit out of my ass. Yep. I know I am. But this dude raw dogged a ton of chicks because he was a rich guy who liked doing that because he could. And we know damn well he didn't want... Anyway. So, all right. So I wanted to get that in there.
Right, which is, so... My issues are with the law itself.
Understood.
Right?
You're a lawyer,
and so with the other aspect of this is how the law is enforced, right? Which is the key. It was really the almost the worst part of this.
This is hideous. Yes, go ahead.
Right. So the way the law is enforced is state officials are barred from enforcing this law, right? So what I mean by that is, like, if you're a state official, right? You can't say, like, you can't, whether you're a congressman, senator, mayor, governor, whatever, like, you can't be the one that says no, Planned Parenthood, you were wrong for doing that procedure, right, and so we are charging you. No, that's not how this works. How this works is it relies on basically the citizens of Texas to snitch.
Rat out, yeah.
Right? And it's like there's a hotline that you call anonymously where you can say, hey, I think, Mary Sue Rattencratch got an abortion over at 1256 Abortion Street. Right. And, and then they can sue, right? Like random person, right? Like just see some girl. You can then sue the clinic where that was done. Or you could sue anyone, like an Uber driver, anyone that helped this girl.
Who participated,
right?
For lack of a better word.
You know what I mean? Like, you become a co-conspirator, aiding and abetting in essentially murder, and you can be sued, and you, if found guilty, would have to pay up to $10,000 in legal fees for the person who brought the case, who, by the way, is just random person who called in and said, hey, I think something happened here that shouldn't have happened. And it was an abortion.
And so you're going at the legal aspect of this.
Yes. Now,
how about the HIPAA part of it?
Before we even get to the HIPAA part.
Okay.
Right? From a legal standpoint, this is absolutely insane. First-year law student is losing his mind over this. Because what the fuck standing does random person have to be able to do that? Right? Like, so how are you going to bring a case in which you can't say the harm that was done to you? So how can I correct this? Right? Like, there's nothing that the court can do in that particular situation that can make you right because you weren't wronged.
Right.
Right? And so that in and of itself is where this law should absolutely fail. Like the Supreme Court should have snapped this up and just like, nah, y'all gonna have to try again. Right? And if they don't do that right out the court.
They didn't.
Right, they didn't do that, but they like when this hits their desk, which who knows when that happens, but that's gotta be the first thing you look at. And one of the biggest aspects of it. The other aspect of that, right, of that particular scenario is the worst possible nightmare scenario, right? And it ties directly to what we were talking about previously as it relates to rape. Let's say a creepy uncle rapes teenager. Teenager gets pregnant. Parents say, creepy uncle raped you. We'll figure out the legal stuff, but we don't have a lot of time. We got to get this. We got to get this taken care of. So they go and get the abortion. Before anything happens legally with official charges. Or this person being found guilty, uncle finds out that the baby was aborted, right? And then the uncle, the rapist, calls in and says, oh, Mary Sue had an abortion and her parents helped. I'm going to sue the parents, right? I'm going to sue the parents and I'm going to sue the clinic, right? So then he gets his $10,000 for ratting them out. Now, their defense is going to be, he raped her, this isn't right, whatever. It's going to be a fight back and forth. But he still is able to cause the person that he harmed, the person that he raped, he is able to impact them, harass them, and possibly, depending on the timing, he could actually win that case and then get his legal fees paid for by the family of the child that he raped.
Yeah. I mean, you just created the ugliest possible scenario.
And it's not hard to get there.
But it's not hard.
It didn't take me long to get there.
No,
That's just the thing. The way the law is written, like, that is absolutely possible. Now, their defense. Now, what they'll say is, well, if you're a sex offender, if you rape the person, then you can't do that. But that's only if you have that official designation, which would only come from the court. So if this person, right, like, if you think of the timeline of when this would happen, right, from the time of the rape to the time the girl finds out that she's pregnant, you may not have time to be able to, like, if she may not want to even talk to the police, right? And the parents are caught in a bind, and even if they say something, what if the guy just decides he's going to disappear? Because you can call in an anonymous tip.
Yeah.
That's the other aspect of it. Like, you just call a hotline. You know, I mean, like, so there's just a number. There's a number of different scenarios why this law should not be able to stand. And if it does, I mean, this is nightmarish, because obviously there are other states that are also trying to implement the exact same thing.
Yeah, Florida's already jumping on board.
Right, Florida, New Mexico, a number of other states. Now, Ohio has a similar bill, but it's tied up in court, and there's an injunction.
You know, all right, I'm going to say something really ugly, and then I'm going to try to move on. If you let me, that's great. If not, you don't, that's fine. But when people say abortion is murder, if you're going to stand by that, then a woman who has an abortion should be charged with murder. Now, I don't believe they should. I don't believe that is the case. But if you're going to stand on that principle and not hold the woman accountable,
no.
Hold on. Trump said that and then backed off on it. Again, I do not believe that to be a fair statement. I'm saying that if you are making the ridiculous statement that by definition abortion is murder, then a woman who has an abortion is part of a murder.
Here's where that kind of fails.
All right,
because
I know what I said is ugly.
It's not about ugly,
and I don't believe it.
I don't. It's not about the look of this. It's literally about the legality of it. If you are chronically depressed,
yes,
and you are physically just injured and nearly incapacitated, but you can still talk, think, whatever. You go to the doctor and you say, "Hey, can you just go ahead and kill me?" Right? And let's say the doctor goes in and says, "Oh, yeah, sure. You look like things suck for you,
okay.
so I'm going to go." Right?
All right.
And let's say it doesn't happen, right? Like, whatever, the doctor miscalculates the amount of ketamine that he gives you or whatever, and you don't die, right? The doctor is going to get charged.
Sure.
You are not going to get charged, right?
With killing myself.
Right. But you're not going to get charged.
But they're claiming another person.
So, but the problem is here, and so what they're doing is they're saying, they're trying to, and I'm not saying that it aligns, but what I'm saying, their argument is that the clinics, in and of themselves, are the person who are doing the action.
Okay.
So they are the ones who need to be held accountable. They know, right, the people who put this law together and the people who support it, the nonprofits and everything else, they completely 100% recognize the bind that they kind of put themselves in, because the super far right, I'm pointing left, super far right conservatives, I know. The super far right conservatives, they are in line with you, who say, you know what, charge the woman, charge the clinic, charge the guy who knocked her up, right? Charge everybody.
Right.
But there are the more media savvy, communication savvy, who say, yeah, we can't go that far.
Oh, I get that completely. Right. I'm just trying to make a logical argument.
I understand what you're trying to, but we got to, with something like this, you got to look at it from every angle. Right,
sure.
In the logical argument, yes, that's it. But at the same time, we need to know what's going on behind the scenes, and that's an internal argument going on behind the scenes on their side, right? Because there are those on the right who want the woman charged, who want her to be brought in charge with murder and everything else, or at least manslaughter. And internally, that's a battle that they're fighting. And they feel like right now there are people who feel comfortable with the Texas law, but they want it to go further. And I wouldn't be surprised because those groups aren't like just people in Texas. These are large nonprofit groups that are, trying to influence lobbyists who want it to go further. So you could see something introduced in a state like New Mexico or Mississippi or pick a red state that goes even further than this.
All right, and I'm trying to point out a logical fallacy. And frankly, we could argue for hours about this. And
are we arguing?
No, we're not. I'm saying we can debate or discuss. But there's so much more to talk about. I kind of like to move on to recent Texas.
Well,
okay, go
I
ahead.
don't want to. There's another aspect of this, right?
Okay.
It's
funny that we always have talked this issue.
Well, I mean, like, look,
intentionally.
I was gonna. I once Texas did this, it was no longer. I feel obligated that we have to say something.
Okay.
Right? And so
I got yelled at by my mom.
But the other aspect of this is, right, they're so worried about saving the life of this child, yet they don't supporting, especially lower income women with what happens after the child is born. Right? And it goes beyond the police treat people like shit. It goes beyond that. Like, you have the cost of actually having the child, like in the hospital, like birth, like the cost of birth is expensive as hell if you haven't had one. Like, you look at that bill, and if you have insurance, you're like, whew, thank goodness. But even if you don't, it's still a hefty fucking bill, right? I know up front, and my insurance is great, right? Like, no bullshit, my insurance is fucking great. But it still costs me a few $1,000s to have a baby. If you're fucking low income, if you make $20,000,
or if you're me who has to self-insure,
right? But I mean, let's
right.
But I know this is weird, but it's not about you, especially this. But if you're a low income single mother, right, making maybe $20,000 if you're lucky. I mean, realistically, $15,000, $10,000 a year. Right, the idea of getting a bill for even $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000,
that's probably multiple rent payments and
right. I mean, all of that. Like, that's devastating. It completely blows up your life. And then these hospitals, they'll send you to collections, and you're talking just ruined credit and everything else. There's also the various things that the kids need before they even get into kindergarten. Right, and all these various issues. So you go back over to what some of the Democrats have been talking about as it relates to the infrastructure bill with child care and like food for kids and all these all these different programs to help. Like, and then Republicans vehemently hate that shit. Right, they won't vote for it and they won't support it whatsoever. Right, and it's like, you can't do those two things, right? If you're going to do something like this, then you better go all in. You were talking about you go all in on birth control and sex education and, getting these low income and middle and moderate incomes, because everything is so fucking expensive now, getting them the support that they need so that they can raise these kids. If we have to have the kids, then goddamn it, give them every opportunity to do it right, because otherwise what happens is they end up being the same kids who cause the shit that happens in the inner city that makes you hate the inner city, that makes you root for people like George Floyd to fucking die. Right? Like, so how about we save you from yourself, right? Because you're a hypocritical, lying, deep, demonic asshole, right? Which you proved over the last 2 years, really, with the way that you view, like, you have no problem with a person like Ahmaud Arbery being killed for fucking running, right? But a collection of cells that no way, shape, or form anyone would consider a human outside of a woman's body, you want to go all out for, right? So fine, but you keep that same fucking energy when that kid pops out of her vagina or gets pulled out of her stomach, right? And you do what you can to make sure that kid has everything it needs, because ultimately that benefits all of us.
Sure.
Right? That kid coming out and having the nurture and the support, what that does is that creates, you have fewer criminals, you have more people thinking and contributing to society with better ideas and better art and better music and all that other shit. Like, that's what creates a society. Right? But what they're doing is so counterintuitive between you got to have the baby, and also once you have the baby, we're not going to help you whatsoever, you or the baby. And in fact, once that baby is born, depending on how he looks, we may come after that motherfucker when he's old enough to go to fucking school.
One thing that you hit on that I meant to accentuate more, because I was going to do it, is how economically disparate this whole thing is. You said it, and you're 100% right. If you have the money to fly out of state, these laws don't affect you. If you don't, it does.
And even if you do, I mean, it's still the idea of trying to set up a medical procedure out of state. Like, ooh, you know, I mean, like, I mean, because I know people, like, I know people who've gone to different countries. Like, my sister wants to go, you know, to Mexico to have a surgery, and I am vehemently trying to get her to not do it because I don't like the idea of it across the board. But logistically, it's a hard thing to set up, right? Like, so even if you have
but it's easy to go from Texas to Colorado.
It is, but at the same time, like, you got to find a place, you got to call them, you got to figure out how to, you know, like, how to get there, and all that other stuff. All I'm saying is that, yes, if you've got a lot of money, you can do it, right? If you're, like I said, if you're Jerry Jones' granddaughter, then yeah, I mean, you hop on the G6 and you go and you come back and whatever. No one knows it's a blink of an eye. But even for, you know, the above middle class, slightly above middle class family, or teenager or whatever, it's still a hell of a process. And it puts an undue burden on the pregnant mother. That's the other aspect that you have to look at from a constitutional standpoint. And I don't know. This is all wrong.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And like I said, you hit on a lot of issues that I was going to. And we don't ever, or not ever, we try to avoid talking about stuff before we get on the air because we want to be fresh. And those were things I wanted to hit on.
And again, with the abortion thing, I mean, my stance, I want to make my stance clear. I think that women should have an option, should have a choice. I think that I'm okay with certain limitations, right? I mean, sure. I think that's realistic.
At some point, it's a viable human. Yeah.
Right, like there's got to be a cutoff. If you want to say 16 weeks, and I know that some people will lose their shit and say that's not, you know, that's not enough time, but I'm willing to compromise here. Right, like I want people to be safe. I want them to have an opportunity to live their lives. I don't want them to have to go into the back alleys, and I don't want this to turn and I don't see this turning out well. That's the problem. Like I don't see any good coming from this other than conservatives saying, "Finally, we got our way. Now we're happy." Right, while everything burns and falls apart around them. As it relates to the lives of the young women that this is going to impact the most.
Steve, I think we can do this for hours.
Yeah.
And maybe we should, but there's a few other things I want to hit on. One of them also involving the state of Texas, and that means recent Texas resident Joe Rogan tested positive for COVID and literally did everything to mitigate his COVID symptoms. He was sick as fuck. He said for a day, and then he said for 3 days. Now, full disclosure, if you listen to the show, you know I am an unapologetic Joe Rogan fan. This is a bad look for him.
Fanboy.
Because I'm a fanboy. I absolutely am. Oh my God. If I go to LA and he's at the Comedy Store, I will fanboy out like a total dope. It'd be awful.
What happened? I missed it because I fainted. I was so excited.
It might not be that bad, but whatever. Anyway, I always bitch at you for causing the spikes in our... I just did it.
Yep.
Anyway, so he got COVID, and he said, give me everything. Give me ivermectin. Give me monoclonal... I don't think he did hydroxychloroquine. Okay. He did ivermectin. He did monoclonal antibodies. He did Z-Packs. He did vitamin drips. He basically said, throw it all into me. I want out of this. And he said his one day was hellish. You've talked about your hellish couple days as when you were suffering from COVID.
2 weeks, but sure.
Okay, well, as far as I know, you pissed yourself once.
I did only piss myself once.
Okay.
But
sorry. But
I didn't poop myself.
As much as that, which is your draw line for us being able to remain friends. You said if I ever shit myself, we can't be friends anymore.
It's true.
You said that to me.
I did.
But so dumb. But Joe Rogan, who again, huge fanboy, whatever. Bad luck for you, Joe, because you were saying the whole time that if you're healthy and you're young, I wouldn't recommend getting the vaccine. Bet you wish you got it now.
I mean, look, I think it doesn't quite make sense to say, fuck a vaccine, but then if you get it, well, I'll take ivermectin and I'll take all these other things, which, I'm sorry, you also don't know what's in ivermectin. Right?
Sure.
You, Jim, may, because that's the field that you work in, but Joe Rogan doesn't know what's in ivermectin.
And he's used that defense a bunch of times. he's always said, I'm a moron, which, hey, he's not. But that's such an easy defense. Like, don't listen to me, I'm a moron. But here I am saying things to 14 million people
on my massive platform. But what I'm saying is you can't say, well, you can. People are, I'm not going to take the vaccine. I don't know what's in it, and I'm healthy, and blah, blah, blah. And then you get it, and then you're willing to try any and everything, experimental or not.
I guarantee Joe Rogan doesn't know what a monoclonal antibody is.
Right. And so there's the hypocrisy there. Now, the other aspect of it, too, is that, Joe Rogan, for any age, is exceptionally fit and healthy, right? And so, listen, multiple things can be true at once, right? Like, not just two things. Like, there can be 17 things all true at once. And so, him being healthy, no matter his age and as healthy as he is, I mean, if you don't know, Joe Rogan works out like all the time.
Freak,
I mean, like weights and kettlebells and MMA and conditioning, and he goes out hunting for long durations of time, hunting elk and shit like that. Like the dude is very, very fit. Right, and the reason why the hunting comes in is because he goes rough terrain and on foot and all that other shit. And he eats incredibly healthy, and he supplements himself very well. He's got a supplement company on it that I think he's a co-owner of or something along those lines.
He's definitely involved. I don't know the numbers.
And so he takes extremely good care of himself. And so he got COVID and he did all this shit. He probably didn't need to do all that. He actually probably would have been fine had he not taken all the shit that he took. But here's the thing. You don't know. Right? Like, listen, there's never an instance where you can say, man, I was too healthy for that situation. Right? Like, I mean, there's never an instance where you could say you were too healthy for a situation or you were too strong for a situation. Right? I've never been in a situation where it's like, man, if you weren't so strong, maybe that wouldn't have, that would have sucked less. Like, there's none, right? Like, but at the same time, like, you can be as healthy as you want to be, but we've seen COVID take down very healthy people, very fit people with no comorbidities. For some reason, it just liked their DNA, it liked their makeup, and said, I am going to destroy your lungs and your heart, and you are dead. Period. Right? You don't have control over this, right? You can try to minimize things as much as you want, and it's smart to take care of yourself, eat healthy, exercise, run, jog, walk, lift weights, do all that sort of shit, drink less, eat more vegetables. That's great. Do it. Do it just because, right? And it may help you with COVID, but it may not do a damn thing for you in the end, and you could still end up in a fucking bed. But what we know, science says vaccines help to minimize the impact of this thing.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we know. That's what science says, and you can be mad about it all you want. You can make up whatever bullshit you want. That's how vaccines work. Is the vaccine going to prevent you from getting COVID? No, it's not. Right, but the hope is that in your situation, if you got it and it was going to hospitalize you, if you got the vaccine and you get COVID, then you don't end up in the hospital. Right, or if you got it and it was going to kill you, then you get the vaccine, you get it, maybe you end up in the hospital, but you fight to live another day. That's the point of the vaccine. Right? So, Joe Rogan, you get the vaccine, and maybe you don't have that fucking miserable day or days or whatever that you had. You also don't pump your body full of fucking horse dewormer or whatever the fuck, right? And you don't shit yourself, right? And this is why Joe Rogan and I can't be friends. But
we don't know that Joe Rogan shit.
He probably did. But, I mean, and that's just kind of my thing with it. Like,
here's the thing. Joe Rogan, who, again, fan, he's been willing to pump his body full of crazy shit. Huge pot smoker, cigar smoker, drinks a bunch, and he also has done ayahuasca, MDMA, mushrooms, which is MDMA, but whatever. He's always been about, certain...
MDMA is mushrooms?
I think that's the chemical compound in mushrooms that gives you that high.
I thought MDMA was just like Molly and shit.
I don't think those are disassociated. I think.
Okay.
Anyway, maybe I'm wrong. Either way, point is, dude put shit in his body, and here's where I'm calling him out for being a hypocrite. He was saying, if your immune system is good, you're strong, you're healthy, whatever, you don't need that shit. He tests positive, starts feeling sick, and he's like, put everything in me. Give me all of it. Give me the ivermectin. And by the way, the ivermectin thing, which drives me fucking crazy, is supposed to be a prophylactic, as in preventative treatment. If that's what you want, then you need to take it a lot, because you need to take it however often to prevent getting it.
And we need to point out another thing about ivermectin is that ivermectin has been approved for human consumption, right?
Sure.
You have to get it
You have to get it through my whiskey shot.
Right. You have to get it through a prescription.
Right.
And there's doses for humans, but people are literally going to Tractor Supply and like reading the back of the bottle and just like, a bucket full.
Yeah,
sure,
right.
I'll take a bucket full, right? Like that's the amount that you take for a horse. You don't even look at that and cut it in half. Right? Like, I mean, how are you even figuring out the dosage?
Here's the thing, Steve. I've been next to horses and seen how muscular they are. You've been blown over by a horse.
I just told somebody that story not too long ago. Like I've literally been knocked the fuck out by a horse.
I choose every opportunity to bring up the story. You
So
want Steve
happy
walking
about
across the
my
UMass
chicken fingers.
quad while getting jacked by a horse.
I had chicken fingers and I had the chicken from the Caesar salad in my little styrofoam container. I was so excited.
I'm such a dick.
And I was going to go talk shit to Nasty Nate. I was yelling at Red Sox fans because there was a big Red Sox-Yankees riot going on the Amherst campus. And I come out of the D.C., the dining commons, and I'm looking at the dorm, and next thing I know, I'm looking at the sky. And I'm on my back, and I hurt. My body hurts all over, and my food is all over the fucking place. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? And I look up, and fucking Mr. Ed is staring at me, blowing, I could see the, breath coming out of his nose. And the state trooper, because, in Massachusetts, they're mounted, the state police are also the campus police. And, you okay? Oh, no, I think, get up. Get up, and like, so I get up, and then I'm like, my food. And he's like, get out of here. And I'm like, God damn it, okay. And I go back up to the dorm, and Nate's like, where's the food? And I'm just like, we're not talking about this. Rough night. Anyway,
I would say I'm sorry.
Still mad about it.
I would say I'm sorry, but that would be an utter lie.
It's just I took a lot of L's that night because I think the Red Sox actually won the game, which is why the riot was going on. The Yankee fans were pissed. So I'm pissed because I hate the Red Sox. I'm hungry, and now I'm still hungry because my food is getting fucking crip walked on by a goddamn horse. I hurt. My whole body fucking hurts. Because I got hit by said horse and then hit the fucking concrete. I didn't even land on the grass. I landed on not even concrete, asphalt. Anyway.
I feel terrible for you. All right. There's so many things.
No, we're not going to be able to get them all.
We're not going to. You want to talk about Elijah McClain? Because that is a
serious we'll have
issue.
We'll either cover it next week or we'll do another episode later.
Let's real quick talk about the stupidest thing on our board. Okay. Because it should be quick.
Really quick.
Because there was a woman who was charged with threatening a man with a knife after he yelled at her for farting at her in a Florida discount store. And the charges were dropped because he didn't, the victim did not want to be involved. So basically this woman just drops a bomb on this dude. And I think it was a Dollar Tree. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
She dropped the bomb on all right.
And he called her out, like, what the fuck? She pulls a knife on him. He calls the cops. They try to put a case out, and he basically says, I'm not putting anything out there. I don't want to be known as the guy who was accused a woman of farting on me and then ultimately threatened to stab me and cut me from stem to stern. Right.
Yeah,
this is dying. I'm sorry, but yeah. we went total 180 there. There's a lot of stuff we didn't get to, but it was a good conversation, and I'm done if you are.
I am.
We are out. Thank you for listening. We're at Whiskey Congress on Instagram and Twitter. Sorry I got a little silly at some points, but actually I'm really not sorry because it was fun. We're out. See ya.